My name is Todd Hataley. I'm going to be one of your instructors of the program. So this is the Big Summer Institute for the Modern Border Security Management. Next couple of days, we're going to be doing all kinds of neat, interesting stuff. We've got a number of really top-notch speakers coming in for this program. Given that, it's really important that I think that we keep our cameras on during the program, especially when we have guest speakers, just to be respectful to guest speakers. I'd really appreciate that. So this is what we're going to do for the next hour and a bit. We're going to go through some introductions. I'm going to talk about the course outline and the course expectations. And then I'm going to introduce you to the concept of security. What do we mean by security? What is security? Next session, we're going to take that concept and apply it to borders and international boundaries. How do we apply security to international boundaries? That'll give us all a bit of a base to start from and understanding the concept of security and how we're going to move forward with that concept throughout the next 3 days. So to get started, let's introduce ourselves. Let's begin by introducing ourselves, who we are, where you're from, what kind of work do you do, and something interesting about yourself. We'll start with the instructors in the room, and I'll pass it first and foremost off to Christian Lupprecht, and he'll introduce himself and who he is and where he's from.
So I'm a professor at the Royal Military College, which is sort of the defense university, if you want, of the Canadian Armed Forces. We train undergraduate students, cadets who are looking to become officers, and we also run graduate programs as well as PhD programs for officers. We also run Staff College in Toronto for those officers who are looking to be promoted to General Staff Officer. We also run the NCO, the Non-Commissioned Officer School in Saint-Jean in Quebec. I also direct an institute at Queen's University called the Institute of Intergovernmental Relations that deals with matters of federalism and the way different levels of government in federal and decentralized states cooperate with one another. Among other things, we've previously done with Todd a book through the Institute and the former federations on security relations in federal states, including North America, Mexico, the United States, and Canada. So one way to look at these topics is always not just as countries, but in the case, for instance, of North America and many of the countries that you'll be familiar with, also subnational jurisdictions that have sovereignty in their own right. I also edit the Canadian Military Journal, which is the official journal of the profession of arms in Canada. And my own background is as an immigrant to Canada. I was born in Germany, but I've lived in the Middle East, the United States, France, Australia. So I'm always keenly interested in international experiences. And so this is so while you might be interested in hearing from me, I'm always particularly interested in hearing from you and your experiences, because this is quasi-field research for myself. Todd Hataley is really the person who got me thinking about borders to begin with 20 years ago, when there wasn't all that much interest in borders. And of course, if you look over the last 20 years, borders, and in particular how we manage borders and secure borders, has become one of the hottest topics around. As you know, it is the trending election issue in the United States. 23% of Americans identify it as their top election priority. So here's an opportunity, I think, for us to have a conversation about that.
Thanks, Christian. Over to Jamie.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever in the world you may be. Jamie Farrell. I'm based over in Australia. I'm at the Australian Graduate School of Policing and Security at Charles Sturt University, where I run our Financial Crime Studies program. I've been over there for about 6 years now. I'd started out over at the university training our police recruits. We have a joint cooperation between New South Wales Police Force, Australia's biggest police force, and my university. So I've done both of those things over in Australia. Before that, I was living in the UK, where I was studying, and before that in Canada, where I worked for CBSA myself. So I worked for Canada Border Services Agency for nearly a decade out here in Victoria, where we all are today, for a little while, and then down at Land Border on the Alberta Montana border, and then out to British Columbia for a while, and then where I eventually finished in Calgary at the international airport, where I worked in immigration. So that's what I've done. Currently, most of my research is around international cooperation, collaboration, dealing with non-traditional threats to border security. So things like trade-based money laundering and different environmental threats. So I'm currently the 2024 Cross-Border Research Fellow with Borders and Globalization and the Border Policy Research Institute at Western Washington University. So that's what I'm doing for the next year or so, doing some research projects in this area. That's a nutshell of me.
Okay, hi, I'm Todd Hataley. I'm the old man in the room, in case it wasn't obvious to everybody already. I'm a professor at a place called Fleming College, where I teach law and security studies. I'm a retired member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is our federal police service. I work border integrity and organized crime for most of my career. Currently employed, like I said, as a prof at Fleming College, but I'm also an intelligence analyst for the Ontario Provincial Police, which is the equivalent of our state police in Canada. What else? I do research on borders and stuff, Indigenous policing and whatnot. We have one student in the room, right? Just you're the only student, so I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce herself.
Oh, yes.
And you can introduce yourself, and then we'll go to people on the screen.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Good morning, wherever parts of the world I guess you're from, or afternoon. My name is Ruguchima, and I am from Vancouver, British Columbia. I am employed with the Canada Border Services Agency as well, just similar to Tanya here. I've been with the agency close to 16 years. I've worked in a few different modes. I've worked in marine operations. I've worked at the second largest airport in Canada, Vancouver International Airport. And I am currently working in inland immigration enforcement. I am a manager / chief with the organization. And something interesting about myself.
Yep.
I ran for a city of Vancouver elections when at the tender age of 22. I did not win, but I put my name in there. I was close, shy of like 600-700 votes. But yeah, that's something interesting about myself. And I don't think I'd ever run and do politics ever again. But.
So I just got to ask you, what were you running? What was your motivation to run? What did you want to change?
Okay, so it was for school board trustee, and the motivation was to bring more. It's very bilingual there, to bring more kind of a cultural perspective, allow for more classes for Punjabi students, so more of the kind of cultural piece to switch things up in the school board.
Perfect.
And yeah, have somewhat of a, I guess, youthful representative. As trustees, we're like 50 plus years old, so.
The old men in the room, maybe. Okay, I'm going to go through the list, and please forgive me because I'm sure I won't be able to say names correctly, but Kanaga, is that correct?
It is correct. Good evening, all. I am Kanaga Subramanian from Indian Customs. I joined the Indian Revenue Service in 2016, and I have around 8 years experience in both internal taxation, goods and services tax in India, as well as in customs. In customs, I have worked in preventive formations in air cargo in Chennai, which is located in South India, in peninsular India. And I also used to write both books as well as articles related to customs for Indian customs. My first book was released during a training. It was about Indian customs and tariff. The first book on the subject. It is released by National Academy of Customs, Indirect Taxes and Narcotics, Government of India. Then I have co-authored another book on evolution of multifaceted partnership for Indian customs. Then one more book on regional history of customs belonging to South India. Then lastly, in 2024, I have co-authored an article in a book on women in customs. So these are my 4 small publications for Indian customs, and then I have written or co-authored 2 articles in World Custom Journal in 2020 and in 2021. And I have represented Indian customs in WCO PICAR conference in 2020 and in Asia Pacific conference in 2021. I am basically a veterinary doctor, and then I have switched into criminology and police administration, and finally I landed in customs. After working in some other departments, finally I landed here. So it's nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So just go down the list in the order that appears on our screen. Malik?
It was me, Melike.
Malika, thank you.
Melike, hello. My name is Melike. I'm from Turkey. I'm studying borders between Iran and Turkey. I'm recently employed in Muzur University, Tunceli, located in Turkey. And my research area generally how capitalist economy affects border formation. That's all, nothing interesting about myself.
Thank you for that. Eric Topping.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Eric Topping. I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia. I worked with Canada Border Services Agency. I'm the chief of Marine Operations Atlantic, so I'm responsible for the teams that manage every commercial vessel that arrives in Atlantic. Something interesting about me, you can see I have a bit of an art wall behind me. These are all my kids' contributions in our office. So that's it. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
It's a great wall of art. Thank you. Anthony Carey.
Afternoon from this part of the world. My name is Anthony Carey. I work with the Kenya Revenue Authority, specifically at the Customs and Border Control Department. What work do I do? So I'm a Customs and Border Control Supervisor, currently posted at the Times Tower, that is the head office. Something interesting about me, I like researching about such engagements and playing chess. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Hasantha. Hello.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hasantha Kaushali. I am from Sri Lanka. I'm Superintendent of Customs at Sri Lanka Customs. I've been serving with Customs for now 16 years, since 2008. I worked at the airport and the seaport, as well as in the head office, which is mainly focusing on the administrative aspects. My area of expertise in customs is wildlife trafficking. So I'm very much into the trade of wild animals and the plants, both legal and the illegal trade. So other than my customs work, I also engaged with the World Customs Organization as one of their technical and operational advisors in the area of illegal wildlife trade again. So having being a member or a WCO expert, I got the opportunity to do some like missions abroad in some other customs administrations as well, especially to evaluate their readiness or the preparedness to combat wildlife trafficking, as well as to regulate the legitimate trade of wildlife. So I'm someone who turned my passion to my profession, where my passion is into the wildlife, and I love animals a lot. So my hobby is the wildlife photography. So I managed to put my hobby into my profession somehow now, although I'm a customs officer working with the animals and plants again. I'm looking forward to have a fruitful engagement with you, everyone. Over to you, back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, man. Nice to meet you. Enoch Magaka.
Hello, guys. Good evening from this end. My name is Enoch Mugaka. I'm currently working in the Kenya Revenue Authority, the Kenya Customs. I am a border control officer based at one of the land borders. I have worked at the airport and currently I'm at the land border. My area of expertise is narcotic smuggling, and I am a canine handler as I double up as a border control officer. I think something interesting about me is I'm very fascinated about working with the sniffer dogs. And I look forward to learning more from you guys. Thank you.
Enoch, how long you've been a canine handler?
I have been a handler since 2018. It's now my 6th year.
Okay, cool. Nice. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Next one down, Shyam Sundar.
This is, I'm Shyam Sundar. I belong to Indian Revenue Service. And the last 11 years, I have an experience of 11 years. I'm from India. My area of expertise is I'm an expert in data analysis, and I have made a lot of cases in respect of gold smuggling, wildlife smuggling, and also drug smuggling. So I am happy to be here. I would like to have a fruitful discussion with you all people. So in the last 11 years, I worked primarily in the seaport, airport, and mostly I worked in the intelligence gathering. And I work for the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, one of the prime agency in India, which deals with anti-smuggling activities. So I look forward to have a fruitful discussion. And my research paper today is on international wildlife trafficking and its impact and the role of customs in stopping those wildlife trafficking and other things. That's it from me. In due course, I'll be looking for further discussion and other my contributions.
Nice to meet you. Nora.
Hello, good morning from here. Sorry, I have to apologize that my camera has some technical issues today. So hopefully by the end of the day will be fixed. So my name is Nora. I'm a PhD candidate at University of Victoria in the Department of Public Administration. My focus is on immigration and particularly newcomer health. I have some experience working for local NGO and sponsorship applications for refugees from the Middle East. And I have some knowledge regarding the screening process of these refugees. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Nora. Bakai.
Hi, good evening to you all. It's a pleasure to join you from Ghana. My name is Benjamin Bekai. I am a PhD candidate at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center here in Accra, Ghana. And I work as a customs officer and the head of the Customs Counterterrorism Unit in Ghana Customs here in Accra. My area of expertise deals with border control, smuggling, and terrorism. I've been working for the past 18 years with customs, and I've had some training exposure in Spain, as well as the United States of America. Currently, I'm working on my PhD thesis on smuggling and its effect on national security in Ghana. It's a pleasure joining you, and I have a great expectation to have a fruitful deliberation and interaction with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Benjamin. Nice to meet you. Bakil McConnell.
Okay, my name is Bekele McConnell. I'm from Ethiopia, and I'm working on Ethiopian Customs Commission and Addis Ababa Airport branch office. And I'm doing now on the position a domestic passenger outgoing service. And what is interesting about me is I'm very much interested in study, and I'm interested in involving or engaging in educational activity. And I'm a part-time lecturer in the university, and I teach economics. as a part-timer. That's all I thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Nice to meet you. And we do have one more that's joined us in the room. So sorry, we haven't been able to introduce ourselves yet to you, but if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Sure. Morning. My name is Trudy Ann here. I am employed to the Jamaica Customs Agency. I am a proud member of the contraband enforcement team. In addition to detecting contrabands, I also do facilitation of learning, training with members of staff and also stakeholders. My research proposal is on drug smuggling amongst Jamaican females. It makes the headlines. We need to know what we can learn from smugglers to tighten our legislation and to bring about change within society, so we can lessen the numbers within our penal systems.
And Trudy, you participated last year as well, didn't you?
I did.
Right. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Trudy, can I ask you a quick question
Sure.
about your research with
Sure.
women involved, the gender distinction between for drug smugglers? Do you find women work as independents or work largely for somebody else?
They largely based on our experience, what we have seen within the Jamaican borders and also within the UK, because the detections are most highest there amongst Jamaican women is always 90% of the time they're working for somebody else.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So let me just go through the course outline quickly and a few of the more administrative things we want to do. Course outlines up there. This is what we're going to do over the next 3 days. We're going to start today with an introduction to security and apply that concept to international borders. This afternoon after lunch, we have a guest speaker coming in who's going to talk about cross-border policing cooperation. He's going to speak specifically about the integrated border enforcement team model we have between Canada and the United States. After that, this afternoon, we have another guest speaker coming in who's going to talk about customs cooperation. Again, we're going to be looking at the model between Canada and the United States. We're going to try and do as much as possible away from being North American centric, but that's largely our area of expertise, unfortunately. Tomorrow, we're going to start with intelligence sharing and go on to listen financial flows, human mobility, and climate change section. On Wednesday, we're going to bring in a lot of private partners, people who work for UPS, the freight forwarding associations, and what's the other one?
Okay.
But no, I can't remember it off the top of my head right now. Sorry. Customs Brokers Association, to talk about how the private sector works with government and policy to enforce border standards. We're going to end on Wednesday with a capstone exercise that will bring everything together. So that's what the outline looks like over the next 3 days. We've got a lot of guest speakers coming in, people who are experts in their area. So we really appreciate if your attention to them. They're all volunteering their time. And I think it's really important that we be respectful of their time. Stand by. Okay, expectations. So I probably don't necessarily have to do this with a group of adults, but I'm going to do it anyway. I teach adults and I find that they have to be reminded of things also. Attendance is important. You've got to show up. The idea of participating is really, really important. The course only works as well as you participate. We do expect a two-way conversation interaction. Christian said it earlier in his introduction. This is our opportunity to learn also. So we really appreciate your perspective and you telling us what happens in your regions of the world and we sharing our experiences in our region of the world also. So please feel free to participate. You can hit the little, is there a little hand button in Zoom or something? You can hit the little hand button, put your hand up, you can turn your mic on, and me, you can interrupt. I don't know about other people, you probably shouldn't interrupt them, but I don't care. Yes, Christian.
We have some really fantastic people, some very senior people from around the world who are going to be joining us over the next 3 days, who bring immense experience. And so don't be shy in terms of engaging engaging with them. So this is why we really encourage you to be active and really take this opportunity to make this an interactive session, because as Todd stresses, they are as interested in what you do and your questions as you will be in what they have to offer.
Yeah. Jamie, want anything? That's good. Okay, so really important, be respectful of all participants. No bad questions. Just be a nice person. Respectful of your instructors and your guest speakers. Just show up, be prepared, be on time, and be respectful. But do participate, do ask questions. Be prepared to ask questions. Finally, be prepared for each session. You may have noticed that we sent out pretty much 2 readings for every session. My expectation is not that you've read all that. That's a lot of reading. 8 articles in a day is an awful lot. But they're there for you to look at and for you to use if you have time and further down the road as we move forward. Okay, so interestingly enough, we have people who work in a wide variety of areas here, and the concept of security is going to mean something very different to each one of you. So let's kind of start. I know somebody was talking about working in wildlife, someone who's working with refugees and migrants, other people are working on terrorism. So this concept of security is going to be vast and it's going to mean different things to different people. So let's kind of start out with the idea of the question, like in your job, how do you define security in the context of your job or the context of your research if you're a researcher? What does security actually mean? Because what we're going to realize, this is a very contested term. It means different things to different people. So like I said, let's start with a little bit of participation. Anybody, we'll start in the room. Ruku, what does security mean in the concept of your job?
Sure. In the context of our agency, I would say it's to protect the people of Canada, and that's through threats of goods or people entering.
Okay. Who else wants to participate?
For us at the Jamaica Customs Agency, security is extremely very wide. It means that we are protecting and making safe our population from outside threats, be it goods and other interference.
Okay. Online? Who studies who's the studies of migration? Who is that? Is that Noura?
Yes. Yes.
When you think about the concept of security, what does it mean? What does it mean to you?
I have to be careful here because also I have to look at the concept from also the angle of human rights. So I want to make sure that when we screen people or when we think of who's allowed in or who's not allowed, it's based on really serious threats to the safety or the security of our communities or society. There is many aspects of how we define security. It could be terrorism. It could be drug smuggling. It could be human trafficking. So the most important concept here is to make sure that the safety net of our society is highly protected.
Okay. Who else wants to chime in on this, add something to it, their idea of what security means?
Hi.
Go ahead.
All right. So within the context of my job here in Ghana, I will define security as mechanisms of protecting the people of Ghana from any form of threat that may emanate through the import and export of goods across borders, and to ensure that everything that is imported into the country meets the required standard for safety and human consumption.
Let's try and take this concept away from the idea of borders. Everybody who's answered the question so far has put it in the context of borders. Let's think about security outside the idea of borders, just a simple concept of security. What exactly does it mean? What are we securing? Why are we securing it? How do we decide what to secure? Think of it in those terms. If you think of it in those terms, does the idea of security change?
It's very individualistic. my idea of being secure and safe would be very different from her idea of being secure and safe.
Right.
Yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
when you think about your own security, what do you think of?
So I think of my health,
Yeah.
my safety as a female, like it's all based on either previous experiences or just the makeup of who you are. It could be culturally, it could be my gender. So my idea of what I need safety from would be different from, let's say, a male, maybe.
Very nice. So you think in terms of culture, think in terms of gender, think in terms of personal experience. Who else can add to this?
I was, if allow me to chip in, I was going to say to remediate security would be a solution to remediate whatever threat or risk concern that would expose something to vulnerabilities.
Okay, so when we think about this term security, and one of the things I put down there is this contested term. Is it possible that for one person to feel secure, somebody else has to feel insecure? Is it possible for a state to feel secure, that the other state has to feel insecure? That there's this dialectic, if you want to say that there's security begets insecurity and vice versa.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that, everyone?
Yes.
Go ahead. Research would be really telling on this one.
So in that instance, I am looking at the current war, Russia and the Ukraine. So that is an excellent example of securing one space and for another to feel insecure. And I think it is important for security is different for everyone. So for me, security would be different from somebody else in another country because, as my colleague said, culture. It all boils down to culture, race, nationality. Race for me because when you go into different spaces outside of my home country, my skin color is pretty much. When I walk into certain spaces outside of my country, persons, for argument's sake, have experienced this in another country. They're clutched on the bags because they're like, you're Black, you're Jamaican, you have a particular, there's a stereotype about coming from Jamaica, crime and violence, what we see in the news. So for me, I need to ensure that I am safe within that space because that person is trying to feel safe in a space where I'm at because I'm from Jamaica. And it's the same kind of concept when you look at, we're going back to borders now. So for flights coming from Jamaica into the UK, security for them is tighter because of the threats. And that's a reality. For us in Jamaica, flights coming in from Suriname and Barbados, it means that all hands on deck because we want to ensure that persons coming in, we don't let in threats to our population.
So you're suggesting that certain things are identified as a threat,
right?
Right, and that might not be fair or right, but we do it for some odd reason, whether it's the color of our skin, the country we come from, whatever it may be. So I would like to know about some more experience that folks online might have with this sort of idea of how security creates insecurity, perhaps for yourself, or perhaps you do it by creating security, you create insecurity for others. I just want you to think about that and tell me about your experience a little bit.
My point is security in the context of job is basically to be classified into some three types. First one is conventional and some newly defined kind of security. Conventional, like arms and all, is traditionally associated with the security, movement of arms or armed personnel. It is conventional type of security, and its movement in the context of job is always put into tight scrutiny. Some other type, like a newly found refugee kind of things, or some items which is regulated by some notifications, that depends on government policy which changes according to time. For example, movement of gold or movement of some other item, including drugs in some countries. And though it is regulated universally, still there is some changes that depends on the policy. Second kind is security can be defined as far as that's my personal view. It can be defined based on known and unknown things. For example, if the item comes through situs clearance or with proper permission by proper declaration and that is approved, or it is known to the other agency, then that trust comes there. It is found as secure item. If the same item without declaration, if it is coming, then it is kind of not allowed or it is kind of smuggled item. So it differs between whether we are knowing and whether that entity which is importing or exporting is trustable. So that's another kind of my conception about security. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Eric, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I think you made an interesting point about imposing insecurity on other people to increase our own feeling of security. I think as border officers, we do this constantly through questioning, examination, detaining people. People are seeking to increase their security by fleeing a dangerous situation, for example. We then put them through this rigorous and strenuous process that could end up with someone being held in detention. So again, looking at I just thought that was an excellent point that you made and an interesting concept to think of. Thanks.
Yeah, this was really driven home to me, this point you make, Eric, and Hassan, I'll get to you in a minute. This in Canada, we've got this struggling with this issue of homelessness. There are people who are unhoused, and there's all kinds of efforts to move the unhoused far away somewhere else because we don't feel secure. People don't feel secure having them close or nearby. So let's move them far away, but we create insecurity for them by doing so. So in our efforts to feel secure, we often make others feel insecure. And that's very unfortunate. Asanta, did I say it correctly?
Yeah, Hasanta, yes, you're right. Yeah, actually, I was trying to echo on the concern or the idea of Eric, and also you also took it up. We as customs officers, what we try to do, like to secure or the ensure security, we try to like enforce the law and like to use the controls so that the people who try to do something illegal or something out of the law, they will feel insecure. So we try to create insecurity for the people who try to act in an unlawful manner, especially at borders. So basically, you both took it up and then explained it. I just wanted to add to that. Okay, thank you.
You make a really, really, really good point here. And this idea that as customs officer or as law enforcement officers, wherever we may work, we enforce certain laws. Where do these laws come from? They're creations that we create. And I always point out, when I was a police officer, marijuana was bad. Then one day in October 2018, marijuana was no longer bad. The laws changed and marijuana was good. So we actually create these things and we go out and we do what we're told, which kind of leads us into this next idea. How do we create these concepts of what's a threat to us? Why is Suriname a threat to Jamaican customs? Why is Jamaican customs? I mean, I worked on that end, so did Ruku, and we Jamaican flights that come in. Yes, it was all hands on deck because we were expecting people who swallowed dope or something like that coming through. So absolutely, there's certain places that are identified. How do we decide what's being secured and what's not being secured, or who gets to decide? I think this is a highly political process, and I'd like to discuss this a little bit. How we decide that certain migrants are threats, certain migrants aren't threats, certain people with skin colors are threats, certain other ones are not. Certain countries accept, certain others are not. How do we make these decisions, or who gets to make these decisions? And we just, as the cog in the wheel, just get to do the enforcement piece of it. What are your thoughts on that? Go ahead, you got something to say.
I guess it's a couple of pieces to it. So one, it is trends. So we obviously have our intelligence, we have analysts. They will collect the trends. So you'll see certain nationalities, what's the highest level of illegal immigration, or like drug enforcement seizures, what it'll be connected to flights, it'll be connected to nationality. So that's one piece of it. It's a trend that we have, right? It is what it is. Those are your numbers. That's what it's dependent on where you are geographically in the country too. What kind of what are you seeing in that specific location? So that will dictate it. And then there is, I think there's a whole political piece of it as well. There could be things that we bring to attention to the higher ups, and it's brought to like the PMO's office or what have you. But if there's other things behind the scene, politics for other countries, for example, let's say could be India or any other ones, or China, what have you, just due to those relations, it might not necessarily be the best place for the government at that time to enforce certain maybe restrictions, let's say from IRCC's perspective of what visa approvals or not approvals that they can have on certain countries. So there's, I think it's two pieces. One is trends, what we can control within the agency at your port of entry versus what politically on the stage, what they can and can't enforce regardless of the trends.
Okay. Other thoughts? Anybody who wants to add in on this idea that we create? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I would take it from the point of view of the theory of securitization, whereby Barry Buzan tries to explain that for something to be considered as a threat, it has to be securitized by the repeated speeches that are made by the security actor, which is mostly the political actors. So when the political actors at the very top of the decision-making process see something as a threat, an imminent threat, and then tries to justify why there is the need to employ an extraordinary force to be able to counter it, then it justifies why something should be securitized. So the decision as to what, why, and whom is to be secured, I think that is a preserve of policymakers at the very top of every country. That's my view.
I'm not going to let you off yet, though. You're going to have to answer another question for me. You ready?
Yes.
What motivates them to decide what should be securitized? To apply that securitization speech, what's the motivation for it? Is it varied? Is it what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so I think that the motivation to securitize something really depends on the situation, which may be influenced by research, by intelligence agencies, by security agencies, and whatever information they are able to pick that could inform political actors to make such speech acts. So it may emanate from various sources, but ultimately, this theory has also been criticized for the fact that it is the preserve of the political actor to decide. So if the political actor probably want something to be securitized, probably based on his own motivation, based on his own experience, he could also be motivated to make such speech act.
That's a wonderful answer. Thank you very much. Not sure I agree with you. Christian, you want to step in on this conversation a little bit? Because I know you want to say something about this.
Let's hear a couple of perspectives.
Okay, a couple more perspectives. Anybody else want to reach in on this? What motivates people to securitize things? What motivates the Jamaican government to see Suriname as a threat, or the Canadian government to see homeless people, or Canadian citizenship to see homeless people as a threat, or whatever it may be? What drives this these decisions, this decision making. What's that? Benjamin, he sees it, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you see it in a fairly pure, that there's intelligence, there's objectiveness, and we can measure things and we say, yes, that's a threat as a result. Are there other things that may motivate or drive people? Enoch, go ahead.
I wish maybe to give, I think, a different opinion. When looking at the political process, especially now the political class that is, for example, is in power, most of the time we tend to see that they are protecting selfish interests. So they'll tend to securitize some laws and some things so that they can, at the end of the day, they're going to push their interests so that maybe to push the public good away or something from that. That's my thought.
I would say money talks, corruption, political votes.
Okay, so we've got greed. I think Enoch said greed. You said money. What was the second one you said? Corruption?
Corruption,
I think-
which ties it to greed, votes.
Yeah, and then certainly in democratic states, there may be tied to getting reelected to maintain power. So security becomes something to maintain power structures, whether we're oppressing poor, gendered people, racialized people, whatever it may be, it becomes a mechanism for that also in some regards. So we can think about all these things when we think about security. Anthony, go ahead.
In addition to what the team has contributed to, let me quote a legend by the name Nelson Mandela and his thoughts on security. And it says that safety and security doesn't just happen, it's a collective consensus and public investment, and that we owe our children and their future generations to be in a secure, violent-free society.
And I think what you did, you hit the nail on the head when we talked about it as a public good. It's something we provide as a public good. Just as we disassemble that public good, which public are we talking about? Because there's lots of different publics. Nora, go ahead.
So I want to add some points to the motivation for the government for security. So I think also political agendas of the government and bilateral relationships or international relationships reflect two countries have some kind of wars or problematic relations. They also sometimes install some security infrastructure to secure the borders or try to minimize the movement of people between borders too.
Perfect. Christian or Jamie, do you want to chime in here a little bit?
You go ahead and read your thoughts.
So I think of this in sort of different categories, and I'm happy for you to challenge me on it. But one is political decisions about security. And one way you can see those political decisions is all of you who work on borders, when you end up at those infamous electronic gates, and some citizenships have the right to proceed more rapidly through gates, and others have to see an agent and receive a stamp. Those are ultimately political decisions about which countries we trust, and much of this is based on trust. Second are economic decisions. So if you think of this from a maritime perspective, that's often the easiest way to explain this is if you think of the law of the sea and freedom of navigation, those are primarily economic interests globally. And what you do at customs, at the land border, at airports is very similar in the sense that you're securing freedom of trade, only in this case, instead of through navigation, it is through airports or it is through land borders. So you're protecting the economic security and the prosperity of a particular country. Usually, if you're talking about securing economic prosperity, that tends to be the least controversial. Once you start talking about political security, then you start to get more controversial. A third perspective is cultural security. So if you think about this from the perspective of Quebec, for instance, all decisions that Quebec makes when it comes to its domestic decisions or it comes to the way it relates to any part of its borders, whether it's with other provinces, the federal government, the United States, internationally, indigenous communities, are ultimately decisions about protecting the cultural and linguistic unique distinctiveness of Quebec. And you will find this in your own countries, that if you're a smaller country in a larger neighborhood with a distinct culture, a distinct language that you're looking to protect, then often many of the decisions have these cultural or linguistic components to the way you enforce or you make decisions, you construct decisions around your borders. The fourth, I would say, is sort of a cosmopolitan human rights sort of perspective, where the basic premise is that all human beings should be accorded a certain level of respect, dignity, regardless of who they are, where they hail from, and that needs to inform the basic standard with which we approach human beings. Now, of course, the challenge is that what countries understand by human rights can be very different. If you are China, you have a very different understanding of state security and human rights, or Russia, than if you are Canada, the United States, or even a close ally of Canada, such as Jamaica. All these give rise to different, I think, dynamics in terms of how we think about security, what we enforce, how we enforce it, and who ultimately sort of gets to make these decisions. And so there's no, depending on what approach you prioritize, these different approaches, political, economic, cultural, and sort of a cosmopolitan human rights perspective are not necessarily reconcilable with one another. And I think one of the challenges for people on the front line is they're often given all these priorities and they're kind of told, you go figure it out. And then you find yourself torn between, what do I give priority to? Do I give priority to the economic interest, the political interest, the cultural interest, the human rights interests? And we can probably come up with a number of other, some of you mentioned wildlife, environment, of course, and any sort of rights that we might accord generally to the environment, to animals, and so forth, is sort of an interestingly, rapidly emerging element of border security. So no obvious, straightforward answers to each of these. And I think part of what, and Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of what Todd is trying to get us to think about is helping us to reconcile these things that decision makers just kind of throw at us, but then sort of leave it up to us to kind of figure out and to sort it out. And so to give us a better toolkit of how we make some of these decisions when we think about broadly, you're supposed to keep people and the country safe.
Okay, somebody had a hand up. Who had their hand up? I lost you. I guess I lost you. So what I want you to think, I want to think about this idea that security can be both objective and subjective. I think Benjamin was talking about Barry Buzan, and of course Buzan breaks it down into four large sections: military, political, environmental, and cultural. I think, I'm not sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, Benjamin. So I want to think about this idea that it's not only an objective term, but a subjective term. We've all been part of the objective. Somebody was talking about how we get information, we put together our files, we look at where most of the drugs are coming from, where the migrants are coming from, whatever it is, we measure it, we feed it up the line to the superintendent, to his chief superintendent. They come back with a strategic plan of how we're going to enforce and do better enforcement based on the stats. That's apparently objective. But there's such a subjective component in there because we're picking and choosing what we send to our bosses in the first place. So I want you to think about this idea that security is both objective and subjective. And we may think of it as objective. I mean, I certainly did when I was policing. We knew that the bikers were a threat, so we had put our enforcement against the bikers. Or we knew that this country was a threat, so we had to be particularly vigilant against people coming in from this country, whether it was Mexico or Jamaica or wherever it may be. So we have to think of it that way. But we need to think about the subjective concept of borders as people who are thinking and working in the front line and moving this concept of security forward. We have to think beyond the objective and into the subjective